A global pandemic, lockdowns, job losses, massive protests, wildfires, hurricanes, wedding cancellations, 2020 has been a remarkably stressful year. And now we're rapidly approaching a presidential election that many view as nothing short of a battle over the fate of the country. And if you're even more stressed by that, you're not alone. The term election stress disorder was first publicly coined in 2016 by Stephen Stosny, a psychologist who penned an article for the Washington Post about the overwhelming amount of distress calls he was getting from patients over the 2016 election. That year, just over half of Americans said that the election was a significant source of stress in their lives, according to a survey by the American Psychological Association. This year, that same survey found that more than 2/3 of Americans were overwhelmed by the election. And Black people and those living with chronic conditions were even more likely to say the election was a major source of worry for them. Clearly, this election is causing us angst. But is election stress disorder a legit medical diagnosis? Not quite, but symptoms show up in the same ways that stress can any other time. If you're experiencing it, you might tense up when you turn on the news, struggle with sleep after watching a town hall, feel too distracted to work, or be so afraid of missing out on the latest updates that you find yourself scrolling through Twitter or checking polls on 538 every hour. You might also feel cranky or anxious around people you know hold different political views. Perhaps worst of all, election stress disorder can make you feel helpless and hopeless, which is one of the reasons it's worth taking seriously. This is Craig A. Smith, an associate professor of psychology and human development at Vanderbilt University.
I don't know that it's a distinct medical disorder in any sense of the way, but it is very clear that this election is extremely stressful. The stress this time is amplified by the context it's in. In the context of this pandemic, is most of us are freaking out anyway, and this just adds another layer to that.
With certain politicians campaigning on harsh and personal attacks, this particular election has also arguably brought out the worst in us. Thea Gallagher, clinic director at the Center for the Treatment and Study of Anxiety at the University of Pennsylvania's Perelman School of Medicine, explains.
When you see a lot of these political commercials or you're watching a lot of the debates, there are personal attacks that are happening on individuals. Those kind of high octane elements are causing people to feel more, anxiety and distress. We know confrontation and even verbal aggression can make people feel more anxious and more activated.
Another thing that makes this election so upsetting is just how polarized we are as a country, in a deadlocked Congress and at our own dinner tables.
It seems like our country and its identity is at stake, and there seem to be two diametrically opposed views of what that country should be, and people seem to be largely unable to hear the other side. A lot of people have their minds made up about the way things should be, and the other side doesn't make any sense to them. And I think that raises the stakes for the election because it becomes crucial that your side needs to win or else really horrible things in your view are going to happen.
Given that it's easier than ever to disagree with someone, even someone close to you, and that it's hard to talk about that disagreement, it's no surprise election stress can have devastating impacts on our relationships too.
You don't find a lot of people having friendly discourse about politics these days. I think it does put a strain on relationships in a different way. It's so easy for us to find all the things that we don't connect on, all the ways to criticize. Some people are saying these issues are too big for me, and I don't think we can agree to disagree on them. And therefore, I do believe that we can't move forward in a relationship.
The good news? There are ways to take action and feel better if you think you have election stress disorder. Starting with, well, it might sound counterintuitive, getting involved.
I think a lot of the stress comes from helplessness, that you feel like there's nothing you can do. To go out and do what you can, getting people out to the vote, helping to staff the polls, campaign for your favorite candidates, just help the electoral process. That way you feel like you're contributing to it and putting up the good fight, which can help reduce the stress. The other thing is try not to obsess about it. Take some time away from the election and do something else you enjoy. Spend time with your family, cook an elaborate meal, engage in a hobby or something, and let it not worry you for a while.
Don't be afraid to set boundaries on what you talk about with certain people, in real life either.
if it's continuing to cause confrontation and strife and, anxiety, there might be certain people in certain places where it is appropriate to say, let's kind of have this be a topic that's off limits. And I think it's okay to set that boundary, and also to have someone set that boundary with you, to respect that boundary.
And of course, make self-care a priority and know when you need to take a breather from stressful headlines or social media and unplug.
Never have I ever been pinged so many times about voting, being registered to vote. I'm getting handwritten postcards, I'm getting texts. This content is taking over a lot of our minds. And that's why I'm really encouraging people that you got to take some strong breaks from social media and the news, because we can't have this content be all that is filling our minds.
If your stress levels are through the roof and you're struggling to function, consider talking to a licensed mental health professional. Election stress disorder might not be an official mental health condition, but there are ways to effectively manage stress and get through this election with your mental health intact.